Welcome to the Bengals 2023 season preview. We are the Wincinnati Podcast Network. Beneath me is my guy Jake. What's going on, Jake? He represents the Bengals Pulse. How you doing,
What's up,
brother?
man? Good, man. Good to see you guys.
Yes, sir. And then to my, I guess this is right. It's always weird when you're on the internet streaming. We got the Fireman, the second part of the Bengals Pulse podcast. Talk to him, man.
Hey guys, how y'all doing? Another day closer to the kickoff of the regular season. Let's do this.
And of course, last but not least, my guy, second part of the Wincinnati podcast, Zimothy Hude.
How you guys doing? My name is Zim. I like to talk about Bengals football. Good evening.
Who day, Zim? Who day?
Hude.
Yeah, for sure. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to have our roundtable come collective and kind of preview the Bengals upcoming 2023 season and kicking things off at like 6 o'clock this morning. We got a notification that Will Grier became or actually signed to the Bengals practice squad. Pleasant surprise because I think a lot of people were kind of wanting this to happen. Zim, what were your thoughts when you saw at 6 a.m. this tweet go out that Will Grier was added to the Bengals practice squad?
It's insane. I think I woke up, I saw it, but I wasn't sure if Mom was up. And I wanted to put in a group. I'm really weird about like texting super early, but I do wake up right there. And the first thing when I went on Twitter, and I remember the tweet said 2 minutes or whoever posted it first. So I saw it like ASAP. I like posted it like on my Instagram or whatever. But it was literally yesterday. We were just like in spaces telling people, I'm going to try to make this as short as possible. It's not, to me, it's not really about like, oh, I think Will Grier is about to change the world. It's just like this whole like this institutional belief that I just believe in the Bengals going out and like leaving no stone unturned. Browning was bad on Saturday. He comes back, has a better game. I think that there was much more to be desired. And in the event that Joe Burrow isn't there or anybody isn't there, I want the depth behind it to be is at the best level. And I think that that's what they intended to do with Trevor Siemian. That was an upgrade from Brandon Allen. It didn't work out, but you can't give up there. You come right back. Will Grier comes off his game. Let me just say this. His game that he had against that he had for the Cowboys the other day combined had more yards than all of our quarterbacks. I saw a stat or whatever the other day in all of their preseason games combined. He did that in one game. So the Bengals saw that and said, hey, look, let me extend the opportunity for this dude to come there. And I'm really, really happy that they at least tried to go and do that or try to give some competition to say, Browning, that isn't good enough. We need another guy in case we get into a pinch. And Will Grier, I thought, was the perfect person.
What were your thoughts when you saw Zim's text message this morning?
Man, I was happy. I'm a big West Virginia fan. I love Will Grier. He's I know, was it a couple years ago, I guess when the Panthers cut him, the Bengals put in a waiver claim for him, ended up going to the Cowboys. So, we were looking at that. I was looking like, hey, if he gets cut, hopefully the Bengals put in a claim or try to sign him. I love him. I loved him at West Virginia. He was a gunslinger. I'll call him a poor man's Joe Burrow. He doesn't have the talent level as Joe, but let me tell you, he's got that moxie. He's got that I don't want to use the word arrogance, but he's really cocky and he's a gunslinger. And at West Virginia, buddy, I remember a game against the Texas Longhorns. The coach for the Longhorns wanted to kill him afterwards because he kept on doing horns down after he beat him. But I just love his moxie. I love his confidence, and I'm glad. I think the Bengals can develop him, and I wouldn't be surprised, once he gets to know this offense, maybe he becomes active on game day. And trust me, I don't want him to play because I want Joe Burrow to play every game. But if he has to come in for a game, we'll see how it goes.
Jake, not Browning. What were your thoughts?
Well, let me say this first. I really, I'm a Jake the Snake Browning fan. I really am. I think Jake should have been the backup last year. And Maan and I did our preview show last night. We talked about, the opportunity that we might have with a Will Grier. And I think I've always said that if you're going to have a backup guy behind a guy like Joe Burrow, it needs to be a dynamic quarterback. It needs to be a guy that can not only play inside of a pocket, but can make plays outside the pocket. And the Bengals really haven't had that behind Joe Burrow. I mean, Brandon Allen he's not a guy that can make plays outside of the pocket. And I think the Bengals understood that. I think that's why they let Brandon Allen walk. I think that's why Jake the Snake ended up being number 2 and Trevor ended up packing his bags, because Trevor's a guy that's a pocket quarterback. And I don't know. I love the idea of Will Grier and Jake Browning battling out for that second quarterback spot. But I'll say this. I think talent-wise, Will Grier is the most talented quarterback besides Joe Burrow that we have had on this roster in a long time. I'm not saying it's going to translate, but hopefully we never see Will Grier unless he's going out there for some mop-up time. But I do think he is a more talented quarterback than Trevor, Brandon, and Jake.
See, I think Simeon had an arm talent, though. I just thought
he does. We talked. Mon and I have said that. I think the ball spins better out of Trevor's hand than the other two guys. But to me, like I said, if you have a guy have to go in and win you a game that's not your starter, that guy really needs to be a dynamic guy. He needs to be a guy because, it's different when you're playing from inside the pocket. A guy like Joe Burrow, we've talked about before, he's the smartest quarterback in the NFL. He goes through his progression so quickly, it's just ridiculous. He knows where guys are going to be. When those backup guys get in there, they haven't played a lot with the ones. There's not a lot of timing involved. So you need a guy that's going to be able to make plays outside the pocket because the timing just isn't there. And Trevor is not that guy. You saw how stiff he was, Zim, in the preseason. He's so stiff in the pocket. He was like that when he played in Chicago. Maan really liked him because of the experience, and I understand all of that. I mean, he had 30-something starts. But to me, you just need a guy that's dynamic. And although it was against backups, I'm with you, Zim. Will looked really good against the Raiders the other night. I think he had 300 and something total yards and 4-something touch. He played the whole game. Listen, I know his stats aren't really exciting what he's done in the regular season, but I don't know. I like the dynamic ability that he has.
Right. I think the Trevor Simeon one initially I thought was a good idea. I was just going to say I thought his arm talent might be better than all of them, but he was cooked. I don't even see him looking down the field and going through any of his progressions. So I think Will might be the little bit of everything. Well, I guess we're going to find out though, right?
Yeah, for me, I just thought the quarterback situation that we had was awful. I mean, for Jake Browning to win it, I think that he did win it. But you got to think about it. That's a guy that didn't throw a touchdown until his third preseason game. He threw 2 interceptions combined, if you're looking at that. Guys that just really didn't impress, obviously, in the preseason, like he kind of did in that last game. But Will Grier, what Will Grier did in that one game for the Cowboys was more than what Jake Browning and Trevor Simeon did the entire preseason, in my opinion. And you definitely had a deficit there, right? Obviously, we moved on from Brandon Allen. And I agree with Jake. I think last year, Jake Browning won that job. They still went with Brandon Allen. This time, they ended up going with Jake Browning. But in my opinion, I would not be comfortable if Jake Browning were to get into a game and do something there. At least with Will Grier, I know that he's played in the NFL before, right? He's a slightly better, I guess, option than Jake Browning. But in my opinion, if you were to go into this season with Jake Browning and maybe, Senate as your practice guy, that would have been terrible. That would have been nasty. Will Grier, I think, adds some stability there. And hopefully, like Jake is saying, we don't have to see him in there. But at least I feel a little bit more comfortable with his arm, with his decision making. He also has some legs as well that we were able to display. A lot of people kind of said that he was on the shiesty mode, which I kind of agree with a little bit because he did have 2 rushing touchdowns and also 2 passing ones. But as Jim is talking about there, this is a perfect segue into shiesty. Joey B is back. He's back. He posted it.
Joe Burrow posted that.
That's
Joey
awesome.
B
Burrow.
returns to practice. I mean, it was an explosive day today. I think we were all looking forward to today being the day of him returning to practice. And number 9 was out there. Maan, kicking it off with you. What were your thoughts on number 9 being back out there today?
I love seeing him walk on that practice field with the other two quarterbacks. I think it pretty much broke Twitter for about an hour there. Everybody was talking about it. We can sit here and say I didn't really have a doubt. That happened 5 weeks ago, 4.5 weeks ago. I really always thought he was going to be ready for week 1. It's just reinforcing, seeing him out there, seeing him practice with his teammates. It was just good to see because, listen, he's our Cadillac. He's the guy that's going to get us Super Bowl trophies, and we need him healthy. And it's good to see him there because he is the face of our franchise. And it was just great to see.
Zam, what were your thoughts when number 9 came out that tunnel, bro, with pads on?
Hey, I knew. Hey, look, when Zach Taylor yesterday was like, "We'll see," I said if he wasn't gonna be there, he would have just said he's, timetable is next week or something like that, just so he wouldn't have to answer questions about it. Because if you say we'll see and he doesn't show up, then he's got to answer the questions. Well, like, okay, coach, did we see? Then the next day, did we see, coach? So I thought that was a signal there. Crazy thing is a guy that, a young kid that does like a lot of stuff with the Bengals and stuff. He kind of gave me a little hint, like around like 11-ish, but I was like, I ain't going to put out there. But I was like, yeah, he's coming on out there or whatever. So I just think it's so dope though. Like watching the Joey B post where he's just making fun of himself, like with that old picture. And he's just like, he's back. People do not understand when we have these conversations about Joe Burrow. It's bigger than football for me. It's a confidence level. It's something that Cincinnati needed. It's the reason why we're sitting here right now saying Wincy or Wincinnati. It's just like this whole that, we get online. What do they say? The Bengals fans, they talk too much trash. No, you're just mad that we're confident and we're not hiding in caves anymore. And if we beat your ass, we're going to let you know we beat your ass. Like, so what? Get over it. And if you don't like it, beat us and we'll shake your hand. But I just feel like Joey B is just like that guy that, everybody's got to have a little bit of that in you to kind of bring that out you, that dog that, so to speak. He doesn't say much, but when he does, people listen. So even if it's just him walking out, I mean, look at the way Will Grier's walking with him. He's like, shit, I'm with Joey B. You know what I'm saying? Like, he got a different
I was
walk
just
with him.
thinking the same thing.
Look at his stroll. Like,
look,
you were telling me off camera, you was like, man, with the 7, I was like, man, he was swagging the way he was. Like, when you with Joey B, think about when Joe B go to the UFC fights, you be like, damn, they with Joe at the fight. It just turns everything up like a whole nother level. And if you're not like a Bengals fan, I can't give you that feeling. Joey B is back.
Jake, what were your thoughts on seeing number 9 out there, bro?
Well, let me just say this. I want to say this too, Zim. I was thinking the same thing. Did you see Will Grier warming up with the two of the quarterback? He's got to be thinking, holy shit. I just walked into a situation where I am playing now with the 3 best group of receivers in the NFL. I mean, can you imagine going from Carolina to Dallas to the Bengals where you have 2 number 1 receivers? I mean, Will Grier's got to be like, how the hell did this how lucky am I to not only be able to play with these receivers, but to be able to play with arguably the best quarterback in the NFL? Let me just say, I think T. Higgins said it best, and that is that Joe Burrow just walking onto that field energized the entire football team. I mean, that we always talk about Joe Burrow and all the tangibles that he brings on the field, off the field, whatever the case is. I mean, the guy, he is the smartest quarterback in the NFL. I don't think anyone can argue anything differently. I think, talent-wise, he arguably is the best quarterback in the NFL. But it's all the other things that he brings, right? It's just the leadership. And you said it, Zim. When this guy speaks, he doesn't do it often, but when he does, everyone in that organization listens to what Joe Burrow has to say. And I just, as a Bengal fan of over 40 years, getting Joe Burrow is the best thing that has ever happened to the city of Cincinnati. I'm going to say that. The Bengals have had, and the Reds, they've had great teams in the past, the big red machine. Obviously, Kenny Anderson and Boomer and all those other guys that did all these great things for Cincinnati. But the Bengals landing Joe Burrow is going to be down the road when we're talking about this on the Wincinnati pod 10 years from now and talking about Super Bowl trophies. It's going to be because of Joe Burrow, and he's just him. I mean, he is him. And I'm with Mon too. I don't think there was ever a doubt that Joe Burrow was going to take the first snap in Cleveland. I don't think there was ever a doubt of that. I think Coach Taylor was probably playing a little mind games here and there. And do we really want Joe to have a regular offseason? I mean, think about the off seasons right now, right? He comes in right away and deals with COVID, right? There goes that offseason. The next offseason, coming back from an ACL. Third offseason, an appendectomy. We played in 2 AFC championships in 2 of those 3 years. Do we really want this guy to have a regular offseason? Because not having a regular offseason has worked out pretty damn well for the Bengals. So, this guy doesn't need to take a snap in preseason. I don't care what anyone says. Him being healthy is the most important thing.
No, I completely agree with a lot of all of you guys' points. Having number 9 out there, it always seems like it's always kind of some motivating return that he has, right? You talk about the knee injury when he came back, was working out earlier than expected. He comes out today after everyone's questioning, is Joe Burrow going to be there week 1? Is it going to be 5 weeks? And Joe's just like, no, I'm just going to show up. It is what it is. Like, he's going to go out there, do his thing. And I feel like we kind of got the preview of that when he came out during the preseason game, was working out, doing sprints and stuff like that. So to have number 9 back, I think right now is perfect. I think he only needs a week and a half. I don't think he needs more than a week and a half to get back in shape and get ready. I think that's going to give him more than enough time. And at the same time as well, with things being closed, we don't know how long Joe has been out there. He may have been out there before today, for all we know. Just publicly now it's being shown. And so I think
Paul Dana and other beats were saying behind the scenes has been kind of like a thing that he's been doing walkthroughs.
Right. Yeah. So he's
at
already doing walkthroughs. Allegedly, no balls hit the floor today. Everything was on point. Charlie Jones even was able to get a catch there. So I think the chemistry is always going to be there. I think Jamar was a little bit more giddy, as Zim pointed out when I talked to him earlier today. So, they're ready to roll. And even though the offensive line didn't get to play together, even though Joe Burrow didn't play in the preseason, nobody wants to play this team with Joe Burrow, a healthy offensive line, these receivers, these weapons, new weapons as well. So I don't think anybody, especially Cleveland, especially when you talk about the possibility that Denzel Ward is going to be there week 1, Marlon Humphrey's not going to be there week 2. That's a little scary for them, seeing Joe Burrow walk around looking completely healthy without a brace today. So I can't wait, like we all can't wait for Joe Burrow to come back. But let's talk a little bit about the roster, right? So we got the 53-man roster. I know we all individually kind of had our takes and thoughts on it. Obviously, they also announced practice squad today. And so a lot of those guys did come back on the practice squad. What were you guys' thoughts? And we'll start with Jake here first on just the final 53-man roster and kind of the way that the practice squad, obviously there's still 2 slots to be filled, but how that kind of shaped up with things.
Well, I think to be honest with you, Mon and I did a 53-man prediction a week or 2 ago. And I don't really think there were a lot of surprises. I think Stanley Morgan not making the roster was probably the biggest surprise. I thought maybe they would keep 7 wide receivers. You could talk, and Mon's going to disagree with me on this, but for a fan base that is so hungry for the Bengals to have a tight end, right? A dynamic tight end. And I'm not saying Irv Smith is not that guy, but I think Tanner Hudson not making this 53, I think is very interesting. And I'll tell you why, because Mitchell Wilcox and Drew Sample are not bad football players, but they're not dynamic football players. And Irv Smith, if God forbid something were to happen, if there was an injury, there's not another tight end on this roster right now on the 53 that can step in and be dynamic like Irv Smith. And I just think a guy like Tanner Hudson, and again, I don't want to speak for Mom, but I know what he's going to say because we had this argument yesterday. I think a guy like Tanner could have ended up being maybe like a Hayden Hurst, right? A guy who has jumped around from team to team and really hasn't found a spot anywhere in the NFL.
Who's going to tell him?
Do what?
Who's going to tell him?
Who?
Tanner Hudson's here.
Well,
on the practice squad.
Well, yeah, he's on the practice squad, but I'm talking about right now on the 53-man roster, Drew Sample and Mitchell Wilcox. If you're telling me those two guys are more dynamic of a player than Tanner Hudson, I'm going to disagree with you.
I think we talk about cohesion and stuff so much with this Bengals team, longest tenure staff. I think Darren Simmons is going to use the heck out of Drew Sample on some special team stuff. I think Tanner Hudson will have the opportunity if anybody gets dinged up. If you look at how they utilize them in the preseason, they use them, and somebody broke this down on Twitter. I don't want to misspeak on the actual reps, but most of his outside of like 6 were all receiving reps, whereas Drew Sample and Ossai's were all like blocking reps, whatever. Mm-hmm. So like it lets me know like they only see him as like a receiving threat, I think.
I think I see the same thing. I'll tell you, I see the same thing in him. But if you're only going to keep 6 wide receivers, right? Don't you need a tight end that can maybe fill in if you need a guy that can spread out and kind of push the field?
I think they're saying on that week is going to be Irv. And if Irv were to get dinged up or something throughout a game, then Drew Sample and what's his name are going to have to finish it out. Then called up will be Tanner Hudson. I guess that's what they're thinking. I think you're thinking more so if he got hurt in the game, you want to see Tanner Hudson ready to go right there and there.
I just want to see active.
I just want to see. I want to see if Irv Smith
I do too.
Down,
I love T.
We've seen. Listen, we have a very good sample size of Drew Sample and Mitchell Wilcox. Listen, I understand the cohesion, and they've both been on this roster for 3 or 4 years. I get all that, but we've seen the sample size of what these two guys can do. They're very limited in what they can do. I just think
I'm with you. I just think I'm the CEO of the T Huddies. Like, listen, I'm a T Huddy enthusiast. I'm with you. I just feel like that's one of the ones. You're one of my favorite coaches. I feel like there's different things sometimes, like from a coaching standpoint, that I kind of like. I'm gonna trust you a little bit on it, but I definitely feel where you're coming from, Mom. Where you?
Okay, I was going to talk about something else on the 53-man roster, but I'll talk about Hudson real quick. I'm a Wilcox guy. I think he's gotten better each year. He's been there 4 years. He's gotten better, bigger. He's a better all-around tight end to me. I don't have anything against Hudson. He had a great mini camp. He had a great training camp, 2 good preseason games. I get it. Everybody on Twitter is falling in love with him. He's played really well. He's been on 4 teams in his career. I think we know what he is. I mean, he played well. I'm not going to discount that. But I think Wilcox, he knows Wilcox, not Solomon, but the tight end Wilcox, he knows this offense. He's been in the same system for 4 years. I think the coaches just feel more comfortable with him. During the 53-man roster, one of my concerns, it's not really a concern. It's a good thing. The defensive backs, 6 of the 10 are either rookies or second-year players. We're very young back there. Initially, the first 4 or 5 games, I think teams might target some of these guys if they come in. We got to be prepared for that. But I think overall, it's going to be a good thing. We're younger, more athletic, and the Bengals are doing the right thing. They got these giant contracts coming up. They got to get young in that secondary, and 6 of the 10 are very young players. And I bring that up in a good way.
Yeah,
I'm riding on the Hudson River. I'm with Jake. I'm with Jake on this one. We've seen, you guys know about me and my history with Drew Sample. I am Drew Sample over Tanner Hudson. What did Drew Sample do in the preseason
That's true.
I guess, do anything? He didn't show anything. Honestly, most of these tight ends didn't show anything. When you look at it, Devin Asiasi got an opportunity. They got rid of him, which was the right move. They tried to throw Drew Sample out there. I think he had one catch, which wasn't a bad catch, but that was it. That was it in 3 games. And then Tanner Hudson did more in 2 games than anybody in the tight end room. So I'm with you, Jake. Like, if we do lose Irv Smith in a game, and let's say it's an important game, let's say it's the Chiefs game, AFC Championship, right? We can't bring him up from the practice squad directly to the roster then. And so I get what you're saying. I feel like he should have made the 53. I'm glad that they were able to keep him. But now you have to worry about somebody picking him off of your practice squad. Whereas with Drew Sample, we saw that none of the other teams out there really wanted to sign him.
Nobody's picking him up. Nobody's taking Drew Sample for a practice squad.
But why didn't anybody pick up T. Huddy then?
I mean, that's a good point. That is a good point. I don't think teams are as bad at the tight end position as the Bengals are. I think there's a few teams, but I don't know. He might be riding under the radar. I
love him.
Zim, you make a good point. You make a good point, Zim. I'm not disregarding. I mean, maybe the him being banged up a little bit during this preseason is why nobody picked up Tanner. I don't know the ins and outs of that. All I know is this. Is that we have watched this team the last couple years. If Tyler Boyd does not get hurt in the AFC Championship game, we are playing in a second straight Super Bowl. You have got to put weapons around Joe Burrow. I don't care. I don't care what Mitchell Wilcox brings to the game.
We got Yoshi, man. Yoshi's that guy.
I don't care what Drew Sample brings to the game. What I do care about is if a weapon goes down, we can replace it with another weapon. And we saw how important that was last year in the AFC Championship game. And Drew Sample and Mitchell Wilcox, again, I'm not bad-mouthing those guys, but they are not weapons. They aren't. They just aren't. Drew Sample is on this football team because he's one of the best inline blockers that the Bengals have. That is why Drew Sample is in a Bengals uniform. It's not because he's a weapon. Mitchell Wilcox is in this he's in a uniform right now because he is a big special teams contributor. That's why those two guys made the 53, and that's great. But Joe Burrow is the best player on our team and one of the best players in this league, and the responsibility is to give him weapons.
So, Maan, you kind of talked a little bit about the corner kind of action. How do you guys feel about Chido and DJ Turner? Because right now, DJ Turner's hurt, right? He's got a hamstring issue, I believe it is. Obviously, Chido's coming back. They actually put Sidney Jones, who's another guy who had some starting experience, on the practice squad. I would think that this signals that Chido, you guys think Chido starting week 1? That's what it seems like to me.
Oh, yeah.
I do.
Oh, yeah. Chido's not missing week 1.
I think
go ahead, Mom.
I think he's going to be on a pitch count a little bit. I think, they'll sub him, but he's definitely going to play.
Yeah. And I think Maan has really talked up DJ Ivy on our show, and I think DJ Ivy might be a guy that can come in and play right away. I mean, the Chiefs, we talk about how young this DB room is. I think the Chiefs had 3 or 4 rookies playing last year in that defensive backfield, and they won the damn Super Bowl. So, I don't think it hurts us at all having young guys that are hungry. We saw what CTB did. I mean, when you put guys back there that are hungry, that want to start in the NFL, it's only going to make you better. And I think for me, I'm not really too concerned about that back end because the front 7 of this football team is so damn good. From the D-line to the linebackers, we have one of the best front 7s in the NFL. And so you can get away with having a younger group of DBs back there. So to me, it doesn't really concern me at all that those guys are young. I really like what Tyson Anderson did in the preseason. I think he's a guy that could be an X factor really in this defensive backfield. And I'm interested to see how he ends up, playing into this depth chart, because I think he's a guy that can contribute right away.
Yeah, I think DJ Ivy, you guys kind of hit on it. I didn't expect him to make the roster initially from some of the comments I read during the draft, but seeing him come in, work with our secondary coach, really create some consistency there, really show off some of that athletic ability, the size. Some people expect him to potentially play the Trey Flowers role. I think you just saw a lot from some of the depth in the secondary. You kind of talked about Tyson Anderson, Jake. You saw that. Jordan Battle. I know a lot of people tried to cool off of him from, the second game, him giving up the touchdowns. The first game, he was out there. He was making moves and stuff like that. And for me, I honestly expected our safeties to have some communication issues. Like, obviously, he's a rookie, but I think he showed some things as well. And I think that we have guys like Jalen Davis that showed why they keep making this roster, because Jalen Davis, when he was out there, I was impressed. I kind of did some all-22 work. There was one play where he shouldn't have made the play at all. He was able to get back over there, get in position to make it. So I think we got some young guys in the secondary that are going to do their thing. And then Chido being back is going to be amazing.
The Chido one, I wanted to circle back to that one real quick. Like Mom was saying, I feel like they'll kind of have him on a pitch count, so to speak, at the beginning of the season. But one thing that is really, really critical for that, I looked at DJ Turner, Juan Drago, as though he would have been the first guy off the bench. And the fact that he's not healthy is kind of a little bit of a downer too. And I don't know how they're going to play that. Now, the good side is Sidney Jones, who was a fringe, we don't know guy type, whatever, like has starting history or whatever. I think now he might be active on that week one, unless Juan Drago just pops out of nowhere this upcoming week or something like that. I looked at DJ Turner as though they would give him some of those snaps outside to kind of spell a woozy at the beginning of the season. So it's going to be really, really interesting on how they play that.
Yeah. Think about this. Think about this, guys. Chido didn't play the last 10 games last year. That is insane. That's insane. That is just incredible to me to think that Chido was not there and how well Cam Taylor-Britt played. I don't think people understand how good Cam Taylor-Britt is. He was a steal. Last year he played like a first-round pick. He is going to be so good this year, having that role now. I don't know. I'm excited to see these young guys play, but having Chido back, obviously, I mean, him and Mike Hilton are really the cogs of this defense, this back end of this defense. And I don't know. I'm excited to see these young guys go out and play because they are hungry. And I want to go back to Jordan Battle real quick. Jordan Battle he's gonna play a lot of the inside the box kind of style where they're putting him in on big rundowns where he can just come downhill and hit people. So I don't think we're gonna see Jordan Battle doing a lot of zero coverage, free safety type stuff. I think he's going to be more of an in-the-box type of a safety.
I'm working on a graphic. I do a bunch of graphics, and if you guys don't follow us at Wincinnati Pod. It's also at Bengals Pulse 9, correct?
Yes, at Bengals underscore Pulse 9.
Underscore. Make sure you guys follow them, guys and girls or whatever. But on Wincy, I make graphics and stuff a lot on Wincinnati Pod. This is a graphic I've been working on to talk about Cam Taylor-Britt. I wanted to compare him to like someone might think is pretty good. I picked Trent McBooty. I'm sorry, McDuffie, not Trent McBooty.
McBooty.
But let's go. The last 3 games, because I hear a lot about the Chiefs secondary. Check this out. Remember, Cam Taylor-Britt went against Stephon Diggs in the playoffs. Last 3 games, PFF grade 73.9 for Cam Taylor, 59 for McBooty. 19 receptions given up by McBooty for 232. Cam Taylor, him, giving up 5 receptions for only 43 yards. That's against the Bills, the Chiefs, the Ravens. Only relinquished a 36.4 quarterback rating when targeted, 1 interception, 0 touchdown. McBooty, in contrast, gave up a 133 quarterback rating when targeted and 2 touchdowns allowed. And I get on the internet every day and people tell me about Trent McDuffie. I'm sorry, bro. Like Cam
McBooty.
Taylor,
I like McBooty better.
McBooty, it's thick. But just to give people like an insight, like y'all gotta stop paying attention to like names sometimes or whatever.
Yeah.
Cam Taylor Britt is not a household name. He went up against one of the biggest dogs in the league and only relinquished 2 catches for 16 yards against Stephon Diggs in playoff games. So when people talk to us about corners and who got the best cornerback room and stuff, especially we had that conversation in the North a lot. Remind you, Chido Awuzie gave up the 3rd lowest quarterback rating in the National Football League and the 3rd lowest quarterback completion percentage in the NFL before he was hurt when he got hurt at that Halloween game. So now you're saying 2 of those cornerbacks. And what does everybody always tell us? Eli Apple's trash. Eli Apple's gone. So now the Bengals now stack the room up with another cornerback. Oh, the fastest guy in the draft in DJ Turner. And then you stack that up so that their 5th and their 6th cornerback off the back end is a guy, Sidney Jones, who started how many games for the Seahawks? Like that's the last corner. While we're watching on waiver day, teams like the Steelers go pick up anybody. Anthony Browns of the world, like going picking up anybody trying to make it make sense where the Bengals have all this stuff aligned. So when you get in these conversations and you start saying, well, how do the Bengals think that they're going to win all this game? Because the cohesion met with the results and the actual players are sitting right there. You talked about the age. They're all right there ready to go. And I feel really good about that.
When Chido was hurt last year, I'm sorry, real quick. I thought the season was over. I thought it was done. I thought he was our best defensive player. We're not going to recover from it. Like Jake said, we won 10 in a row. Listen, we got to give Lou all the credit. That guy's one hell of a DB coach, defensive coordinator. Look what he did. Chido came from Dallas. He had a really bad year. They signed him on a real team-friendly contract. Look at him. He's turned into one of the best cornerbacks in football. Cam Taylor Britt came in. Jake talked about him. Look at Eli Apple. You know, he jumped around different teams. He came to Cincinnati. Eli Apple played good for us. He really did. And people don't, I mean, a lot of people that aren't Bengal fans don't realize that. It's our coaching staff. Our defensive back coaches are the best in the NFL. They get these guys ready. And I think those young guys I talked about are going to be ready for the Bengals.
Yeah, speaking of young guys, let's flip to the offensive side. The running back room. I think that showed us a lot in the preseason, as well as the wide receiver room. The skill players on this team, the depth is crazy. Obviously, looking at a guy like Chris Evans, I think he really made the most of his opportunities this preseason, really stepped it up. Ended up, in my opinion, kind of supplanting Chase Brown from that running back 2.5. I don't know what you want to call it, running back 3 spot. I feel like he ended up making a name for himself. I think he can definitely be a weapon. I also feel like he showed that he was an improved pass blocker from that standpoint. And then, of course, on the other side, Yoshi. I mean, this was the Yoshi preseason. Andre Yosivas just went nuclear this entire preseason, showed that he belongs. So I'm very excited for some of the young guys and the young weapons that we can add in both of those rooms. Chase Brown, that last game, just went crazy, bro.
Let me ask you guys a question. I don't know, the expectations were higher for Charlie Jones, but let me ask you like a real question. Do you feel as though Yoshi has distanced himself from Charlie Jones on the depth chart, or do you all feel like that's just a product of availability to shoulder or whatever? Like, what is the status of that like in your mind?
Let me go first on this one, because I'm going to tell you right now, Yosivas reminds me of one of my favorite Bengals of all times, and that's Carl Pickens. And it's not just because of the number. This guy plays with the same the moxie of the way Carl played the game, the way he was on bad Bengals teams, and he was sometimes the best player on the field. And Yoshi reminds me of him so much. He's a very physical wide receiver. He high points the ball really well. I mean, we saw that touchdown that he was an inch or two out of bounds, but what an incredible play that was. The over to the shoulder grab he had. Yoshi is going to be a star in this league. He really is. He is, to me, Jordan Battle was my favorite pick in the draft this year, but Yoshi is going to end up being the best pick of this draft. And Yoshi's going to play a lot of football for this Bengals football team. Maan said it earlier. If Yoshi's on this football team last year, when TB goes down, that game looks a lot different. He's just a dynamic player. And I swear to you, man, he just reminds me of Carl Pickens. I absolutely loved what we saw from Yoshi.
You know, he reminds me of Marvin Jones. I know Marvin Jones wore 82, but the speed is maybe an inch taller or so, whatever. Like, check out somebody's got a side by side online currently right now of like them two, and they look very similar, like just the way they wear the socks and stuff. But I think some of the things that plagued Marvin Jones early on, you know, like just attacking the football and stuff, those are the things that Yoshi has to learn. Mom, what do you think?
You know what? When we drafted him physically, I mean, the measurables look great. I think Ace, you're the one that said it, that, you know, he's a lot more polished than people give him credit for coming from that Ivy League school. And he has really impressed in preseason. He just looks the part. He's physically imposing. One of those games, he just looked like, I mean, he was so much bigger than the defensive back that was covering him. I think he's going to have, you know, a good year. I think he's going to get better each year. Charlie Jones, listen, I'm excited for him. I think we need to be a little more dynamic at the punt return game. He didn't have many opportunities in the preseason, but I just didn't see that electricity there when he did return those punts. We'll see how it goes. Maybe it's that shoulder issue that that dinged him up a little bit. But I'm really excited about Yoshivas because I really think he has the potential to be a very special player.
One of the best players. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me say, one of the best players I've ever coached in my 20-something years of coaching high school football went and played at an Ivy League school. There are a lot of great players at Ivy League schools, a lot of great players. So I think that probably coming out of the draft, people are looking at Princeton and they're thinking, oh, it's an Ivy League. Let me tell you something. There's a lot of talent at that level.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, when I looked at this kid coming out, watching some of his film, he didn't look like a guy that was like super unpolished or just like a track athlete that happened to play football, right? This was a guy that was a football player. I feel like, you know, some of the things that he needed to get adjusted to in the league would be speed and stuff like that. But when you talk about route running, body control, some of these things that he was able to do, getting in and out of his breaks, being more versatile as a receiver, not just being a one kind of high point guy, he can do more than that. He can get yak. He can run after the catch like we saw him do early on. He's got the speed to do that. He's very fluid. And he's got the Princeton. I mean, we talk about the Ivy League thing, but to me, that shows how you're able to retain information. So when he's getting coached up by a guy like Troy Walters and stuff like that, or when it comes to learning the NFL schemes or the offensive schemes, he's going to be able to digest that quickly. So I had no issue with this guy coming in and doing that. He's also got size. I mean, we talk about the 6'3", 200 pounds. Like, that's what the Bengals like. He's got the size and the athleticism. I personally had him over Charlie just based kind of off of that, just because he was a bigger guy. He'd be able to have some success early. I expected Charlie to do some things, especially in the slot. And Charlie showed some things fairly, but Josivas just showed a lot more. When it was third down and the game was on the line, even though it was preseason, they were going to Yoshi. And in those moments, I think that's what kind of signaled the confidence that they have in him. I think Charlie Jones, as it stands now, I think there's a gap between the two, but that doesn't mean that Charlie Jones can't be good in that backup slot role. And hopefully we get to see more from him, even in the special teams role, which I was a little disappointed in seeing from Charlie Jones. He didn't really do enough to really separate himself away from Trent Taylor, but knowing that his background has primarily been a special teamer, I'm not really too worried about it. Hopefully he can get it together. But I do feel like in a situation where Tyler Boyd goes down, Charlie Jones is going to be a guy that you can depend on. But right now, after that preseason that Yoshi did, Yoshi was the best player in preseason. Let's not even talk about receiver. He was the best player and most consistent player, I think, in preseason.
And you said it perfect, Ace. All those attributes that you just named, things that he can do, it's Carl Pickens. I'm telling you guys, Carl Pickens. He was so deceptive. You look at him and he didn't pass any eye test, but on the field he was different. Man, he could get you those yaks, the yak yards. He could high point the football. He was a great route runner. He was so underappreciated. Carl Pickens was one of the best players in the NFL at that time. He really was, not just on the Bengals roster. He was just on bad teams. But Oh my God, Carl Pickens was so
You
good.
know what makes these conversations so crazy, especially like the one we were talking about Tanner Hudson. It's kind of the same conversation I think I was having about Michael Mayer. It's like if it were any other team, I think people might confuse this with a lot. Like you jumping and already saying the comparisons to Carl Pickens, they aren't crazy to me, but there might be somebody says, bro, he hasn't even played that. Bro, when you line up with Joe Burrow, though, it's so different to me on how I even judge the position. It's literally the reason why I was the biggest advocate for Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase could have went to any team in the NFL and had 1,200 yards maybe his rookie season. And it kind of been like a Amon St. Brown type, you know what I'm saying, fly under the radar. Like, think about like Waddle. Like, bro, you put Jamar Chase with Joe Burrow, it's fireworks. It's a team that was only going to win 5-6 games going straight to a Super Bowl. And that's the conversation, like the one we were talking about Tanner Hudson earlier, or the new Yoshi Boss conversation. I remember having a conversation. I was telling people this earlier. I had a conversation one time with Marlon Humphrey when I've only met him like one time. He wasn't the biggest fan of Joe Burrow, but the one thing that he did say at that time, and it kind of reminded me of their fans now. He was saying that Joe Burrow, no matter what, finds the one-on-one matchup. Is nothing you could show him. There's nothing you could do to disguise it. He's going to find the one-on-one matchup. And he was telling me how he thinks how so many quarterbacks don't play within like just that. And they go and try to go through like robots and stuff. And he's like, he does that stuff systematically, but he finds the open matchup like so easy. And that's the thing about Yoshi on this team versus Yoshi on another team. If you're saying Yoshi, and I think Yoshi could play wide receiver 3 for at least like 8-9 teams in the NFL right now. Like 8-9 teams right now be wide receiver 3, maybe even more. But those situations are very different than the Bengals. Bengals in 10 personnel or going 4 wide or whatever, and Yoshi been in a one-on-one situation changes everything in the dynamics. And it's the reason why earlier, Maan, you were saying Tanner Hudson playing for 4 different teams. But the one thing I was going to say, because I was trying to make it both sides and whatever, but the one thing we haven't seen is Tanner Hudson play with Joe Burrow. Think about Thaddeus Mosses of the world. He really had people thinking that Thaddeus Moss was an NFL tight end. He's that good. You know what I'm saying? All the tight ends that came here, they all left and got $24 million. Uzomah had never done anything that worth merit. Now, remember when Uzomah left, they were like, man, you guys sure are going to be missing Uzomah. I'm like, no, we're not. Like, Joe Burrow is going to throw to anybody right there, and they're going to be good. So,
agree.
Higgins, Chase, and Boyd. I'm saying Higgins, Chase, and Boyd, they all missed games last year. And what the Bengals did in this draft was needed because I think we upgraded our talent level at wide receiver. I mean, that's something to say because it was already talented, but with Yoshivas and Sizzle, I feel a lot better if those guys have to come in and play if somebody's out 2 or 3 weeks. But the way our offense is, we throw the ball so much. Some of these guys might miss a game or two, and I feel better with them coming in.
Well, I want to ask you real quick, Maan, because Ace brings up a point about the running backs, and we haven't talked about those guys yet. Maan, you're a big Chris Evans guy. Is this going to be the year? We've talked about it on our show. Is this going to be the year that Chris Evans actually contributes to this football team?
I hope so. I thought he looked good this preseason. If you guys hear a dog in the background, I'm sorry. I have a new puppy. She's going crazy right now. But no,
I'm excited for the Bengals, man.
That's right. That's right.
For the season.
You know what that is, Maan? That's that dog in you. You just got to let it out sometimes.
That's right. That's right. She's biting the heck out of me. No, I love Chris Evans. He was in one heck of a dog house last year. So hopefully, I think he's very talented. I think he's probably, you can make an argument, probably the most talented running back on the roster. He's so good. We'll see. I mean, he had a great preseason. I think, there's going to be a lot of opportunities to carry the ball there because Perine's gone. So I think he's probably going to be running back 2 right now until Travion Williams, that ankle gets fixed or whatever's going on with that. Chase Brown obviously is going to play quite a bit, but I expect Evans probably to be the second running back on the team right now that's going to get majority of the carries after Mixon.
What do you guys think? What do you guys think about Chris Evans versus Chase Brown? You guys saw Travion Williams. He was cutting today. He looks like he might be ready for week 1. What do you guys think, ASM? What do you guys think about
Man,
Chris?
for me, man, Superman. I mean, not Superman, but Captain America. I've always been a Captain America guy with Chris Evans. You know, I've been quoted as comparing him to Reggie Bush. I'm not backing down off of that comparison because I think from a play style standpoint, you can line him up at slot receiver and let him run out there and run some routes. He is explosive. He is a guy that can, you know, go from 0 to 60 pretty fast. He is a guy that if you get him out open in space, he can go all the way. And I mean, we've seen him in the limited amounts of times that he's been in the games. I think about back to the Detroit game. That looked very Reggie Bush-esque, him catching a touchdown on a linebacker on the go
Chiefs
route.
game.
The Chiefs game, he pops out, catches that one in space. Big game there. So I think he's ready, bro. I think the only issue may have been the pass blocking. Seeing him take on DJ Reader, I believe somebody brought that up. Like just the fact that he was willing to take that on just shows how far he's come as a player for this team, and I think he's ready to take the next step.
Can I say that with the way that the running back position is now being managed in the NFL and the ownership around the league, I feel like they're conspiring to lower paying running backs and all these different things like that. And, you know, Joe Mixon kind of gets caught in a cycle. He's forced to take a pay cut for all of that and stuff like that. The one thing that I will say that I think that the Bengals are doing that is like a little bit is deviating from what I think they normally would do. And yes, Joe Mixon has the ability to play every down. He really does. Like, because as a receiving threat, we could get into pass blocking and all that stuff like that. You can't really blitz the Bengals. Like, just let Joe Mixon go out to the flats. He had 60 reception last year. So he can 100% play on third down. But one thing that I think that they're doing, and it's going to be a natural progression, and I think they're kind of ahead of the curve on this, and I could be wrong. I think you're going to get a heavy dose of all of them dudes. We might walk out of games where guys got like 20-something yards, and other guys got like 40-something. And generally, most of the time that I watch football, and you know this, Coach, especially like big runners, you got to get them in a rhythm sometimes. You got your scat backs that it doesn't really matter. But you can't come out of a game and tell me that Derrick Henry had a bad game and you only gave him 12 carries. Yeah, right? I think that like that doesn't exist. Like the Browns game from last year, they're like, Mixon, he wasn't good. I'm like, bro, he had 6 carries. Like, what do you want him to do? Like with 6 carries. But I will say this: I think that the amount of carries will maybe still be where it's supposed to be at. I get that, but I think maybe Mixon gets 10, 12, and he better do something with him because Chase Brown's going to get he might get 2 or 3, or he might get a catch in that game. Travion is going to be your P. Ryan replacement. He's your best pass protector. Like, I know at practice he's your best pass protector. And then you got the ability of Chris Evans to go out. He could run an option route for you. He could run digs. And now we saw in preseason, they're like, okay, you can give us a couple of runs. I think that they might be like with this 4-headed monster. And I'm telling you, it might look different, and we might walk out of this. I don't know, from a fantasy football. I'm sorry, Joe Mixon fantasy owners. It might not look like an incredible season if it goes the way I'm saying. But, man, I see so much talent on all of those guys, and it shows you all throughout last year. These are different ways that you can win. And then put this into perspective. They went and picked up Dominique Felton, who I just said 2 days ago is like a poor man's Chris Evans. He's somebody that can really receive passes from the running back position. But I thought Chris Evans gave a little bit more in the run game, whereas Felton is like one of the best receiving running backs I've ever seen come out of college or whatever. So you got that now in the practice squad. They got some guys, bro. And I think anybody that's casual from the outside in saying, oh, well, they off P. Ryan, will get a load of this because Travion Williams and them dudes is coming. Chris Evans is coming. A fired up, pissed off Joe Mixon is coming. This team is really loaded at that position.
Zen, this team is loaded. This team is loaded at every position. This is
except tight end.
Except for tight end, right? but this team is the depth on this team. Guys, we really have not seen a Bengals roster like this, maybe ever. I don't want to use ever yet, but maybe ever. This might be the best roster this team has ever had. This organization has ever had.
2015 Bengals. I don't know.
Don't start that. That takes a whole listen. Don't. Let's not do that.
I'm gonna
Let's
tell
not
you
do
the
that
depth. Hold on,
That's
real
gonna be a
quick.
whole hour show on that.
Ace, you're the
let's stay
backbone.
away.
You're the backbone of everything.
Let's stay away from it. Let's stay away.
Yes,
But
Let's stay away from it.
2009 was pretty
Hey,
good.
2015 defensive line though. did not have
2013, don't sleep on 2013 as well. 2013 was
that
pretty
defensive
good, too.
line had Geno and Dunlap or whatever, but the depth behind it, it wasn't like that. I think the front. All right. I'm gonna stop. I'm not gonna do it.
But speaking of, we're talking about D-line. Obviously, the big news is, as reported earlier, Joseph Ossai could be expected to be out 4 weeks. Obviously, this kind of ties in with Myles Murphy as well. How do you guys feel about him being out the 4 weeks with a high ankle sprain? How does that impact the Bengals defensive line?
Well,
Jake, you can start it off.
I think Joseph Ossai looked just as good as Yoshi. I think if you're talking about who really looked different in the preseason, Joseph Ossai had an incredible preseason. Those first 2 games, he dominated, and you should dominate. I mean, good players should go in and dominate games in the preseason like that. Joseph Ossai, he looked great against the run in the preseason. He looks like he's got a quicker first step than he's had in the past. I think this is a big injury. I really do. I think I don't want to see this injury being downplayed at all, because Joseph Ossai was a guy that we were expecting to come in and be able to alleviate some of those reps for Trey Hendrickson. And now Myles Murphy has to play like a first-round pick. And we didn't see a lot of that in the first – well, he didn't play in the second game, but we didn't see a lot of that from Myles Murphy in the preseason. So this Joseph Ossai injury – and isn't it interesting too, Maan and I talked about this on our show last night. Isn't it interesting that with this Joseph Ossai injury, the Bengals didn't keep an extra edge rusher. Instead, they went and kept an extra D tackle. I think that's kind of interesting to see the Bengals work their roster like that.
Yeah, I would say, man, the Ossai loss, I think obviously it hurts a little bit. The fact that they took Myles Murphy, though, that softened the blow a little bit as well. Because Myles Murphy needs reps, right? Like, I feel like Myles Murphy, he's taken a lot of heat from a lot of people on Twitter, and I understand that. But to me, like, knowing the prospect Myles Murphy, I wasn't too surprised, because he isn't a guy that has too many moves, but he's going to beat guys based off of that athleticism. And so if you do throw him out there and he gets enough reps, I think eventually, especially with playing with the defensive starters, he can get out there and get to the quarterback. He did have some flashes of that in the preseason. Unfortunately, it was just that the quarterback got rid of the ball right as he was closing in there. So having him there is big. I think when you add Ossai back to it, it's going to be nasty, bro. Trey Hendrickson playing after getting that extension, being fully healthy. You also have Sam Hubbard. You have Cam Sample to throw in there. And then you get a Zach Carter that looks like he's replenished. Like, the D-line is going to be nasty. So even though Ossai is out 4 weeks, it's not the season. It's not half the season. It's just the first. I don't even know if it's a quarter now that we have 17 games. So for me, yes, it sucks, but I think that the Bengals are prepared for it.
This is the crazy thing. They generally dress 8 defensive linemen on Sundays. So this is the one thing that I was thinking about. Was Murphy, because with Cam Sample playing as good as, like you talked about Cam in preseason, Jake, man, I just think Cam Sample has been coming on really strong. And I thought, like, as an inside-outside piece, that's a guy I think that they're going to roll out there a lot faster than I thought Murphy. But now that Ossai isn't going to be there, I think it's probably Cam Sample. You're probably relying on Zach Carter on the interior a lot more. This whole entire season, we're relying on Zach Carter a lot more than what people think. And they did, and it shows you that because they didn't go and address that in free agency to go pick like a veteran 3-sec or something like that, or a veteran interior D tackle at all. So Zach Carter is like a guy. Cam Sample is another guy, though. We saw that in a playoff game when Trey Hendrickson was getting picked on and they were running right at him. They then brought in Cam Sample to bring in and stop some of those wham blocks that the Ravens were doing, trying to get you turned sideways, and then they run the action right off of it. I thought that Ossai would have been like an insane pass rush with like given what we know. But I think Cam Sample in that rotation with him and Murphy, you probably think because of who you're playing, the Browns, you might play Tupou. Bro, it's so many guys that I'm not even sure like who are the active 8 when you go play a team like the Browns or you go play a team like the Titans and stuff. You got to have some big boys up front in the trenches. So I don't even know if this is like a pass rush type game anyway. So like a guy like a Raymond Johnson III, like there's no way he would have got, you know what I'm saying? Like I don't care what he did. Like you got guys like Dominique Davis that are now like pushed down on the practice squad. You got guys like Gunther that are pushed down there on the, you know what I'm saying? You got bodies on bodies like behind it. So I don't even know how that would even work in there. Because Murphy, man, there is a chance. Andre Parada was telling me this too. He's like, man, it's a chance he might not be game day active. And I was like, a first round pick, but then you start going through it. Man, it's a lot of guys that got to get some snaps.
That D line is good. And I'm going to say this really quick. You were so right about Zach Carter. Zach Carter is going to be a huge impact player for the Bengals this year on that front seven. He looked really good in the preseason as well. Really just dominated inside. And we have not had interior pass rush on this team in a very long time. Zach Carter might be that guy.
Yeah, I think I still shaking my head that Ossai played in that last preseason game. Can't go back in time and fix it. But you know, I expected him. I still expect him to have a huge year for the Bengals. Zim, I agree about Sample. I'm going to tell you right now, he is. Charlie Goldsmith wrote something in the Inquirer about him that how he expects a player like him to have a giant contract next year from another team. He has that much potential, and I think he's going to come in and play a lot. The defensive line, they're loaded. I mean, what can you say? Tupou's underrated. You know, backup Reader. I think the Bengals have the second or third highest paid defensive line in the NFL. And, you know, that's okay with me because it all starts in the trenches. And it's good to have those guys because every one of them is one hell of a ball player.
I mean, I think you showed me the Warren Sharp report and you can look at different metrics out there. Bengals currently, by most analytic companies like ones that I trust, are ranked as the 6th best defensive line overall in the National Football League. That would be 2nd or 3rd generally in most in the AFC conference itself. Now, most people say, how could that be? Myles Garrett and all them. You got to go look at the depth in the defensive line, guys. All these players that we're saying, that's the reason why I love this team so much is because it's not so dependent on the front line guy. We've seen our team without Trey Hendrickson. We've seen him with a broken wrist. Maybe it's not as good. We've seen our team without DJ Reader. Maybe it's not as good, but they got bodies on bodies of players that have been through these different games, playoff, meaningful games, and stepped up. That Titans game is a game for the ages for defensive line play. You ever want to see what defensive line play looks like? Look at the 2021 Bengals when they go against the number 1 seed Titans and that offensive line that is playing like the way that they're built. The Bengals just threw 10 people at them. They loaded it up and they just say everybody is going to be a man today. And that doesn't always mean in this fancy league that we live in now where everybody's like, you got to get sacks. How many sacks did they get? That's not everything. Sam Hubbard is the number 1 run defender, 32% win rate, run stops in the National Football League, the most since 2017, currently in the NFL. So I get it. We judge a lot of defensive players by just sacks and pressures and all this stuff like that. But how are you stopping the run? Because that is a function of the Bengals only putting 6 in the box because on the back end, we're stopping coverage. And this defensive line is loaded, and I love it.
Well, I know you guys have enjoyed all of this content that we just brought to you guys tonight. Be sure to hit that notification bell and that subscribe button because this is the Wincinnati Podcast Network. We have the members of the Bengals Post joining us tonight, Jake and Maan. Definitely be sure to check them out. They just dropped the show yesterday, so if you haven't heard or watched that, definitely be sure to check it out. We're also in the podcast store under the Wincinnati Podcast. Then you can also catch me and Zim. We do our show as well. And we're going to be coming to you guys twice a week with both shows on this network once the season picks up. So we want to thank you guys. And I want to thank the panel here for taking their time out tonight to come through. And of course, we're going to end this with a Wincinnati.
Wince.